The darkness of the city pressed down on Dax like a suffocating blanket. It wasn't the kind of darkness that could be shaken off by a flick of a light switch. No, this darkness had weight. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. Every step he took echoed like a gunshot through the empty streets, each footfall more menacing than the last. It was midnight, and the only thing moving in the shadows were the flashes of neon signs that buzzed faintly above, casting eerie glows on the grimy streets below. Dax's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The sense of being watched, it was overwhelming. He turned the corner sharply, his eyes darting around. Nothing, not a soul in sight. And yet, the feeling lingered, a whisper on the edge of his mind, a constant nagging thought. Was he being followed? The streetlights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows on the cracked pavement. Dax cursed under his breath, quickening his pace. The last few days had been a blur of paranoia, but tonight felt different. He could feel the weight of it in his gut, that strange, undeniable sense that something was off. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 12:03 a.m. A sudden crash echoed in the distance, something falling, something breaking. Dax's head snapped up. That wasn't just the wind. Someone had made noise. Someone was nearby. His heartbeat quickened as he glanced around. No one. But the hairs on his neck stood on end. He spun around. Nothing. The street was empty, save for the broken glass of a streetlight on the ground. "Focus, Dax. Focus," he muttered to himself, trying to shake the feeling. But the whispering in his mind wouldn't stop. It was there, creeping closer, inching its way toward him. He continued walking, one foot in front of the other, trying to ignore the pounding in his ears, the twisting in his stomach. He had a job to finish. He had to find the answers, even if the cost of them meant going deeper into this suffocating, silent abyss. Dax had spent the past few months unraveling a mystery, one that had cost him more than he cared to admit. His reputation, his freedom, and now, perhaps, his life. He had no idea who was after him, or why they were coming for him, but there were things at play that were beyond his understanding. Pieces of a puzzle that made no sense. Yet everything felt connected. He'd learned that silence was dangerous. The city was alive with hidden secrets, and some of them were worth killing for. He hadn't seen the first warning signs. It started small. An unmarked envelope left at his door with a strange symbol on it. The kind of symbol that made no sense, yet triggered something deep in his memory. It was only after the second package arrived that he realized something was off. But it was too late. And that's when he realized someone had been watching him. Now, every creak, every groan of the city felt like a whisper, like a silent breath on his neck. Dax rounded another corner and stopped dead in his tracks. There in the middle of the alley stood a figure, motionless, still, like a statue. A silhouette against the dim light from the street above. Dax froze, his breath catching in his throat. Who was this? And why couldn't he see their face? He took a step forward, instinct kicking in. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, to hide, to get the hell out of there. But Dax wasn't a coward. He wasn't running. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. The figure didn't move. He took another step. The figure raised a hand, a gloved hand, and pointed at him. A voice rang out, smooth, low, and cold. Dax! It was as if the figure knew exactly who he was, without even needing to ask. The hairs on the back of Dax's neck stood on end. He tried to speak, but his words caught in his throat. The figure in front of him was unnervingly calm, but there was something in the air, something menacing. Dax's pulse raced. His hand instinctively reached for the gun hidden beneath his jacket. "I don't know what you want," Dax said, his voice shaking despite his attempt to remain calm. The The figure tilted its head slightly. "It's not what I want, Dax. It's what you have." Dax's mind raced. What the hell was this person talking about? "I don't have anything. I don't—" "Not yet," the figure interrupted, their voice cutting through the tension in the air like a blade. "But you will. You'll come to understand. Soon enough." The figure stepped closer. Dax's heart pounded in his chest as a chilling realization washed over him. This person wasn't just some random stranger. They were part of something much bigger. "Who are you?" Dax demanded, trying to steady his breath. A slow smile curled at the edges of the figure's lips. "You really don't know, do you? What a shame." The figure took another step forward, and suddenly Dax felt the world shift around him. A noise, a snap, sounded from behind him. He spun around just in time to see a dark shape emerging from the shadows, too fast to react to. Before he could raise his gun, a hand shot out and knocked it from his grip. Dax's body slammed into the cold concrete wall with brutal force. The air was knocked from his lungs, and for a moment, everything went black. When he regained his senses, he found himself alone. No figure, no shadow, just him, breathing heavily against the dirty, cracked pavement. What the hell was happening? He pushed himself up, his body sore, his mind spinning. He needed answers. Now more than ever, he needed to figure out who was behind this, and why. With gritted teeth, Dax checked his phone again. 12:16 a.m. Time was running out. He had to move. But the question gnawed at him. Who was watching him? And what did they want from him? There was no way he was going to let this go, not after everything he'd already sacrificed. Dax turned and ran back the way he came, his footsteps slapping against the pavement in rhythmic urgency. He didn't have all the pieces yet, but he could feel it in his gut. The answers were close. He wasn't just a target. He was part of something. And he was going to figure out exactly what that something was, no matter the cost. Hours later, Dax found himself in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. The place smelled like mildew and rust, the kind of place where forgotten things went to die. The air was thick with dust, and the only sound was the faint hum of a broken light flickering overhead. His breath was ragged, and his pulse never seemed to slow. His mind was still racing, but the pieces, those pieces, were starting to fit together. It wasn't just the symbol, it was the package, it was the person. All of it pointed to one thing. But before Dax could make sense of it all, a voice, smooth, calm, cut through the air. "You're getting close, Dax. Too close." He spun around, gun already in hand, and there, standing in the shadows, was the figure again. This time, the person's face was visible, but it didn't help. It was blank. No features, no eyes, just a face, but nothing that looked human. "You're a pawn," the figure continued, the words ringing out cold and final. "And you're being watched, every move, every breath, every second, and you have no idea who's pulling the strings." Dax's heart skipped a beat. The pieces of the puzzle were no longer just confusing, they were terrifying. The person in front of him was no longer just a threat. They were a part of something much darker, something much more dangerous, and that's when it hit him. He wasn't meant to understand everything right away. He wasn't meant to piece it all together. He was just meant to play the game. A game with rules that he didn't know, but ones that would cost him everything if he didn't figure them out fast. In that moment, Dax realized the truth. There was no escape from the Watcher. There never had been, because the Watcher had always been him, and he had been playing into their hands the entire time.